The Storm of Chaos was the end times before there was really an end times. And with it, it brought a lot of great content to the Warhammer universe. And with a lot of lore breaking and kind of interesting combinations, it was the prototype to what would become the kind of grand dismantling of the Warhammer Fantasy Battles universe with the end times. The Storm of Chaos was retconned shortly after it happened, but it brought a lot of cool things here and there. Namely, it brought Vultan the Exalted, or actually his title would change depending on which version you wanted to field or what stage in his story you were fielding. But Vultan is really this amazing, he's just this amazingly done character that has a lot of poor circumstance surrounding his well, you'll see. I don't want to spoil all the goodies just yet. So today we're going to cover Vultan in all of his many forms. So how this video is going to work is that I'll be covering Storm of Chaos, Vultan's first, a little Storm of Chaos version of Vultan first. Then we'll go into the Vultan of the end times. And they're different, but definitely worth describing both with their own kind of justice, because they do segue here and there, and I want you guys to get a total picture of what he's like. So let's jump into a brief history of Storm of Chaos real fast, and just so you can understand why it's not being used anymore. So it came out around 2004 or so, and it was this summer campaign, and it was designed as a way to forward the storyline of the series with the community driven results. And it's kind of cool, right? For instance, enough wins for one faction over the other would dictate certain outcomes. Warhammer 40,000 had something similar to this with the Armageddon campaign and subsequent Black Crusade campaigns. This intention was that Chaos would make its way to Middenheim, and there it would be a grand battle that would result in a shift in the lore. Instead, all the players playing as the Empire-aligned factions kept really beating the hell out of the Chaos-aligned factions, so the campaign really never moved forward on its own. Games Workshop had to force it forward, and thus the ultimate conclusion. And there was a lot of speculation around what ultimately went wrong, and honestly, even what I just said is relatively hearsay. I mean, from having experienced it firsthand, it is what it is, but maybe there's other circumstances that I don't know about, so I'm not going to say, oh, this is fact, stamped and approved, but this is one gamer's opinion who was in the 2004 summer that this came out. But the result was an 8th edition, what we see in Total War Warhammer 2 as well, that happens before the Storm of Chaos, followed by these subsequent end times that supplants and retcons Storm of Chaos entirely. So you have now the history, how they kind of worked around it by basically placing the next edition, the 8th edition, before it, and then just the destruction of it with end times. So at that, let's finally get back on track here with Vultan. He was born in Reichland in a small town called Lochenbad. It's unfortunately not on the map for Total War Warhammer. The closest major city is Uberisk, and even that is not on the map. So, it's east and slightly south of Helmgart along the river. That's about the best you can get. Oh, and this handy map that I'm displaying. That just kind of shows you exactly where it is. But he was born to two normal parents in a quiet town, as mentioned. But nothing really out of the ordinary, for the exception that he has a birthmark of sorts, and it's this twin-tailed comet of Sigmar. It's smack dab in the middle of his chest. This is marked as an omen by the people of the village. An omen, depending on the source, that is good or bad. And I mean, most of them actually hate him. And the villagers fought for hours and days, regarding whether or not to get rid of the baby. And ultimately, the parents decided that they would raise young Vultan and teach him his father's craft, blacksmithing. And I feel like every major coming-of-age, grand hero journey story in a fantasy universe starts with someone being a blacksmith, because, I mean, what's more badass than shaping malleable metal with a hardened state of metal? Woof. Either way, Vultan lives out the majority of his childhood in his peace, training with his father and minding his own business, really. The villagers don't really bother him, despite their initial hesitation when he was born. He took to things quickly. He understood complex lessons or situations with relative ease. He even outgrew the children of his age, getting stronger and faster than all of them. And it's worth mentioning that maybe my favorite theory at this point is that Sigmar himself is one of the lost Primarchs of the Emperor in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. And this doesn't explain Vultan, but there's a lot of the same things going on with his youth that matches up with the Primarchs. So that's just kind of a cool little aside. But eventually, as all things happen in the Warhammer world, the city is attacked and beset by a massive Beastman tribe. Tribes were known to come from the forests in all parts of the Empire, but usually they're just some form of skirmishing party or small band. This was a gigantic horde of Beastmen that fell upon the town. The Beastmen killed and pillaged their way through the town, putting the hoof to anyone that they came across. And most fled in terror, some tried to fight to no avail, really. That is, until Vultan gets pissed. Now, he fought and punched his way to his father's forge, killing beastmen with his bare hands, before picking up 2 massive blacksmith hammers and going to town, in his town, on everything with a horn, hoof, or even a billy goat beard. He probably killed the local town drunkard for having a scraggling goatee. Who knows? I don't. Eventually, he squared off with the leader of the horde, Rargarth, the beast lord that initiated the mighty attack against Lochinbod. They have this kind of titanic duel, and each one trading blows wildly with the other. You got the untrained arm of Vultan versus the bestial howling of Rargarth. And eventually, Rargarth lands a large slash across Vultan's chest, and another blow that is blocked by his hammer. This kind of forces Vultan onto his knees. Kind of have this image of him holding one hammer up, blocking a scimitar, and the other probably just down on the ground. Something really, very, very statuesque. And he deflects another attack and stops Rargarth's blade. And Vultan eventually rises to his feet and just kicks the beastman away from him. He hurls his hammer in the process at the same time, just chucks it at him Captain America style, or I guess Thor style, and the massive mallet collides with the beastman's skull, killing him instantly. And the beastman, being beastman, obviously sends them into a state of panic as they flee from the town almost immediately. And if only there was if only they were as opportunistic as, say, like the orcs or Skaven to lead once their leader falls. But oh well, I guess it doesn't matter when you have feet that are made of hooves. But Vultan is seen as a hero, really, among his people, and from all over the Empire, people kind of come to see the boy who stopped a Beastman warband. And this, of course, piques the interest of Luther Huss, the prophet of Sigmar, and a character I'm honestly quite surprised is not in Total War Warhammer. And maybe he'll come in the 3rd game, and maybe even Vultan will, but I don't know. That's just another little side thing. But he's convinced that this is indeed the incarnate of Sigmar. So Luther brings Vultan before Karl Franz with the intention of installing him upon the throne. And if he is indeed the incarnate of Sigmar, then the Empire is his by his right. So Karl Franz decides not to declare Vultan the new emperor. He knows the kind of current state of affairs. So here's where things are at right now. Archaon is roving into the Empire from the north at the head of a massive Chaos army. The Elector Counts have been summoned to one grand alliance, with much begrudging at that. So, he decides to name Vultan the spiritual leader of the people. This seems to appease the people who would have demanded that Vultan sit upon the throne. And this is interesting because the books don't really talk about the Imperial citizens as being overly pious or zealous. In fact, the end times, the human pantheon is almost completely ineffective and helpless as their temples are toppled. There's way more emphasis on gods such as like Ulrich or Sigmar, but we loosely talked about belief and how it contributes to pantheons. Well, we'll see the effectiveness in it as the effectiveness it has for the Imperial pantheon, but Sigmar's a bit of a different story, and Ulrich as well, and we'll get into that when we get into the Empire portion of the end times. But still, Vultan and Franzia ride out together at the head of all of the armies of Reichland to meet up at the final mustering point of Talabheim, before heading to a besieged Middenheim. And this is where you get this sort of Lord of the Rings-esque calm before the storm. Franz had gifted Gal Maraz to Vultan before they even left, but the dwarves and high elves come forward to offer their aid as well. The dwarfs deliver a suit of Gromrel armor that was contracted for Sigmar some 2,000 years ago, because clearly no dwarf was going to be able to use it. So the High Elves, though, offer the mighty steed Althandin. It's sired by Malhandir, which is Tyrion's own steed. So both races join in the final fight as well. It's a combined force of humans, High Elves, and Dwarfs march on Archaon's army to relieve Middenheim. And orcs are in there in the mix, but just because we'll get to that. We'll get to that. There were 3 flavors of Voltyn in Storm of Chaos, or in the tabletop. You've got the Chosen of Sigmar. This is his very first iteration. The Champion of Sigmar, and then the Exalted of Sigmar. And I'll show you all 3 models right here, but the titles work in chronological order for the models too. So the youngest being Chosen, and the oldest in the Gromrel armor being the Exalted, and the Champion, of course, being the one in the middle there. Or I'm sorry, I think it's to the left. That is clearly not as badass as the Exalted looking one. But the forces of Vraltenzia, Vraltenzia, I'll say that, Voltyn and Franzia, eventually relieve Middenheim, pushing Archaon's forces back with a number of skirmishes and battles leading up to an eventual final showdown between Archaon and Voltyn. Now, finally, what the people have wanted, right? In the ensuing charge up to each other, Voltyn's horse is shot out from under him by Chaos artillery fire, so he returns the favor. He kills Droghar the second they meet up. The ensuing fight is grisly and it's brutal. By unhorsing him, Voltyn knocks Archaon to the ground. And as Voltyn moves in for the killing blow, Archaon has none of that, and releases the demon bound within Uzul, the Slayer of Kings, his sword, to help him impale Voltyn. And this reveals his twin-tailed birthmark, as kind of Voltyn tries to pull the sword out of him. But this gives Archaon like a brief moment of pause, like, oh, are you the incarnate of Sigmar? Like, oh. But this gives Luther Huss all the time he really needs as he charges the two. He smashes Archaon around with this big 2-handed hammer, and Archaon eventually regains his composure and footing after being dome-shotted by a warhammer multiple times. He throws Luther Huss away from the fight, literally hurls the bald prophet of Sigmar into a wall. So that's dealt with. But as an exhausted Archaon rounded back on Voltyn, he is immediately headbutted by Grimgor Ironhide. Grimgor breaks Archaon's shield, beats him around like four whole eggs and 2 egg whites in the morning, and then spares his life before kicking him in the balls, then declaring Grimgor is the best. Wait, hold on. Grimgor is the best. Now, I wish that there had been a better ending than that. But unfortunately, there's not. And then that's how the grand Storm of Chaos ends for Voltyn. I mean, you kind of have this epic titanic battle, and all of a sudden Grimgor just kind of tusks his way into it and kicks Archaon straight in the dick. But that happened. So after the fight, the people of the Empire are in turmoil as they insist that Voltyn should be made the Emperor, as he's the Herald of Sigmar. And this plays heavily into his divinity and thus divine right. During the 3-day period allotted to come to a decision, Voltyn is murdered by a suspected Deathmaster Snikch as he lay recovering in the Temple of Shalaya. So Luther Huss is clearly heartbroken by this, but he is told by Franz to kind of treat it as a cover-up. Now, tell the people that he will return when he's needed again, and obviously right now he's no longer needed. So kind of an anticlimactic ending here, and I haven't gotten into the end times. Storm of Chaos had a lot of problems with it, but it gave us a lot of great things, or a lot of great revamps into the models or characters or units that hadn't been touched on in a long time. I mean, we get Voltyn, Ungrim Ironfist, Be'lakor, the most badass Demon Prince model of all time, Boris Todbringer, we get Vardek Krom, the Hellfire Cannons. The Chaos finally gets artillery and what was suspected to be the new Chaos Dwarf models. But still, let's get into the end times for Voltyn. So, for the sake of time and argument, relatively everything is the same for Voltyn leading up to his discovery in the end times. Only, in his discovery, Luther Huss personally witnesses him killing Chaos warriors and plague bearers, not just some beastmen. And then he kills them with his bare hands. And then he breaks both of his hammers, killing a demon prince of Nurgle. So, whoa, big difference here. He's almost, well, he is definitely superhuman in this iteration. And after this moment, the Emperor gifts him the Ghal Maraz and follows up on Luther Huss's declaration of making him the Herald of Sigmar. There's no 3 different models here. There's no 3 different titles here. Boom, right out the gate, he's the Herald of Sigmar. He's Vultan the Exalted. He's top of the chain here. And for the most part, the Emperor is okay with him. Yeah, sure, he's the Herald of Sigmar right off the bat. He's the spiritual leader of the Empire. He doesn't kind of toil with it. There's no semantics here. He's just, boom, right to it. And we first see Vultan in action at the break in the Auric Bastion. And the Auric Bastion is this large defensive wall that was set up by Balthazar Gelt before he was discovered dabbling with necromancy. And we see him at Alderfen. And guys, trust me, we'll get into more of the Auric Bastion, Balthazar Gelt, necromancy thing when we cover everything in the End Times Empire. But I just want to at least give you that's the foray into all that happens. And there is a really weird campaign, I guess you could call it, that kind of follows suits afterwards of Vultan leading these kind of diversionary forces here and there and random attacks there. But one thing is for certain, Vultan brings the noise to any and all of the minor Chaos champions throughout the books and lore. He kills damn near everyone, including both Wulfric the Wanderer and Vardek Krom. He just reaps this massive tally on everyone with a name and a horned helmet, pretty much. Eventually, just like in Storm of Chaos, though, he comes to a final epic duel with Archaon, and it's actually this amazing point in the books, too. You have the writer epically talking about Ghal Maraz and the Slayer of Kings clashing back and forth, shaking the ground as people look on. You have Gregor Martok, the now Supreme Patriarch and last vestige of the Empire god Ulrich, lending his aid to Vultan by summoning up this blizzard to try and give him an edge, and definitely this sort of end times battle. And then a Vermin Lord Deceiver from Clan Eshin sneaks up and decapitates Vultan from behind. The video didn't cut out. I'm just that disappointed. Hell, even Archaon was disappointed. It's as if the writer went, damn it, I can't backspace what I've done. Archaon gets violently angry, so mad that his fury brings a lightning bolt from the sky that blows up the Temple of Ulrich. The book outright talks about how he is furious at being denied his prophesized battle. And I am as well. Archaon, I side with you on this, you three-eyed king. And again, I wish I could have a cooler ending for this character, guys, but 'tis not in the keys. So, this paints the picture of Vultan, the Herald of Sigmar, one of the most epic and badass Empire figures in the lore that just never really was able to get off the ground. Both times he had so much promise behind him, and both times the hype was just dropped short. Instead, we got the lore of an amazing character and a series, Storm of Chaos, that birthed a lot of great changes for the lore and for the armies as a whole. But there you guys have it. If there are any more lords or characters from the lore, such as Vultan, you'd like to know more about, please feel free to comment and let me know. I'd love to go and do one on one of these videos on Be'lakor, on Ankari, and all the other minor yet kind of major characters. I mean, Vultan isn't a Balthazar Gelt in the end times, and he definitely isn't a incarnate of heavens that Karl Franz is, but Vultan is still very pivotal. He's very amazing and a very well fleshed out character, and he's got a beautiful model, this luscious blonde hair, but I think that for the most part, he was a really amazing Empire character. So that's my 2 cents on Vultan. But thanks for watching here today, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a good one, and take care.